Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by again. First things first, you'll see something up here. Let me get it up. Okay. This is the, I won't go into detail. It shows the canal and the waters of the canal, their depth. Now, way over on the left, you see it at a very low point. That is pretty much the lowest point it reached from a long period of slow but sure decline. Since then, and this is the last 30 days, you can see what direction it's been taking. So in the beginning, they were at 24 transits on the canal, and they expected to fall to 22, but did not because rains were coming in. And as of today, we're June 1st, we're at 31 transits across the canal. This compares to 36, 38, numbers like that in the past when there was no problem. And we will get up to that point, I feel, by the end of the year. And the canal is always very conservative about what it expects for the future, and rightly so. And they, in fact, this jump to 31 was actually scheduled for June 15th, and now 2 weeks early it is being instituted because the water is there. As long as that continues, and it rained today, then we're headed in the right direction. We'll see if that can continue, but for the moment, it's what we would expect, and it's what the climatologist said was most likely going to be happening, and so fine. We're good with this. Now, the last video I did, if you missed it, was on the immediate reactions to the elections that were held. That is now facing an inauguration event in a month's time, July 1st. That's when it's done constitutionally. And we're in the middle of the politics of sorting things out as the new administration attempts to put together a coalition, since its party does not have anywhere near a majority of the total. Nobody does, really, in order to lead get its program enacted. I mean, this is traditional. It's common in many Latin American countries, but it's very traditional here, is that people get together and they form a plan, and the administration is in charge of that. And it has put together a coalition of parties that agree to help it out in the beginning and so forth, and they move ahead in order to get something done, rather than just sit there and argue with each other. This is tricky this year, but it's tricky for a good reason, and that about a third, at least, of the members of this new National Assembly will be independents, and they are a critical factor now in the operation of the National Assembly. There were about 5 of them last term, and that was new. So this has been a great jump in their influence, and that brings me back to a lot of comments made about the movement against the mine and against corruption that led to the closure of the mine contract. My concern, and people know this. At first, I got a great deal of interest from younger adults and younger population, many of them students, because I was supportive of what was going on. I saw what they were talking about. I understood what they were talking about. I was happy to see them expressing their opinions. They have every right to. They are voters from the age of 18. And I was down, visited, saw them, and as they marched through the streets, and they were very calm and ordinary, organized, and I was never in any fear of any sort whatsoever. They did a good job of it across the board. But near the end, I started to warn them and said, you've been doing this for 3 weeks, you're moving into a 4th week. This is getting to be a bit too long. You're going to have to do something more than this. So be careful that you don't end up losing the support you've been beginning to get. And that did not go over well with some people. You have to be either all in or all out, so to speak. My concern was this, because I see this going on all over the world, and that is a younger generation that gets very upset about what's going on, and then doesn't actually do anything that makes any constructive difference in what they're talking about. Either because it's somewhere far away from them where they have no influence anyhow, or because it's back here at home, but they haven't really put themselves out there. They don't have an agreement on what they're concerned with. I mean, it just isn't working for them. And my concern was that something like this could happen here, and that we have basically a younger set of adults. These are people in their 20s and 30s predominantly, and some 40s, of course, who really were enthusiastically supporting that movement. And where were they going to be on election day? And who would they have to vote for and everything else? Let's see if you can come through with it, is what I was saying without saying it. Can you do it? Can you actually bring it home? Are you willing to take the risks of embarrassment, of having to go out with little or no money and no party organization supporting you, and really push hard for this? And what do you mean by push hard for this, and so on? That wasn't as popular. But they did it. They did it. And I was so pleased. And I remain so. They're acting in they're adults. So to say they're acting in an adult fashion makes a lot of sense. It's just that they're not people with the experience in that system. Good. Because they've watched that system, they've seen it. They have some people who have had 5 years experience in it, and they've got that group to help them. But the simple fact of the matter is they're smart. I've read some of the interviews and heard some of them. I mean, they're very articulate. They're really on top of things. They're very dedicated and devoted to pushing any form of the gross overspending that was being done by the National Assembly on themselves. That is what they would call corruption, and other forms of corruption that's showing up from time to time. And we all know exist out there. And their unity and their ability to express themselves is very, very positive. And the president's openness to sitting and talking with them and working something out. I like to see people from the 20th century, you might say, from that system, and people from the 21st, if you like to put it that way, get together and work something out that makes sense, without hatred, without violence of any kind. There's conflict in the sense that there are legal cases challenging some of the election results. It's part of how it works in a democracy and how it works here in Panama. And they have the rules and regulations, and they're being followed. And accusations are made. They have to be supported by facts and so forth and what have you. So that's normal. And it's good experience for the new independents. This is how it actually works. They told you what it was like. Now here you are. This is what's happening. And you're the target of all the pressure and all the interest. So you're going to have to deal with that. And they are. And they're doing quite well at it. So I'm not worried. I'm worried more. Of course, we don't have the money. We can't do everything we'd want to do at all. We have to make some tough decisions. There will be points of disagreement between the administration and the assembly, and within the assembly, as to how to go forward on this. It's a long path because it has been a challenging situation for some time, but we're really making progress. And all of this that has gone on over the last few years seems to have borne fruit. So that a lot of different interest groups, a lot of different interests, and not just young adults, but way on up to much older adults, have been tended to, so to speak, have been looked at seriously. I think it's the beginning of something much better. So I congratulate everybody on that. And I want to assure you that it's very, very nice to sit here and watch people get on well and not a hint of violence or unpleasantness or anger or anything on election day. And now the disagreements being dealt with within the system. They're in charge of their own country and their own political process. Good for all of them, the whole lot of them. And so, Viva Panama. Just one moment. I've got something else to share with you I'd forgotten to add in. I was going to be putting in a whole section here regarding what I had last said was coming, which is part two. I won't go into any detail other than that. Only to say that I've been working on and off on that topic for the rest of the day since I did the first section, and it's just too long. So it's not going to be put together that way. So I'm going to finish it off with a single fact. Probably the most surprising. It is the most surprising fact I've ever seen about Panama in 20 years. Probably the least well-known one, but probably the most accurate and valid one that I have around that I can point to and say, this really comes from the people who know the truth. And that's what I want to share with you. I thought it might interest you. Let's put it very simply, racism was a hallmark of the Spanish period and the immediate period following that when their descendants continued to control most of the politics of the region. There's nothing unusual about that. Certainly plenty of colonial empires in those days were racist. Nothing new at all. When the Americans came in the early 20th century, they were racist too. It was maybe slightly more gentle, but not much. And at least they didn't make it a major issue, as far as I know, amongst the general population. It was just a standard sort of white response to the black population. That changed. And by the second half of the 20th century, it had changed dramatically in the U.S., and it had, right behind it here in Panama, it had changed too. But it was still there. And it was here when I got here in 2004. I could see it occasionally, but it was, to me, from outside, it seemed pretty mild compared to what we faced up in the U.S. But to folks here, it was a different story. And there was this sense that being too black was a bad thing. It would prevent you from making something of yourself and getting a decent career and so on. And there's some truth. There was some truth to it, but there's something went on. Something happened. So in 2010, as in every census before, Panamanians were asked to describe themselves. You don't have a list of races and ethnicities and things of this. You just a blank, basically. Who are you? Where are you from? What are your roots? What's your heritage? And so forth. And they supply the words. They can be any words they want to use. It's entirely up to them how to describe themselves. There's a lot of ways in Spanish to say all sorts of grades, black and brown and white and everything else. But it's pretty simple to take them all and separate them afterwards, and you can get the broad categories. And in the 2010 census, there was 9.2% that claimed to be black, or a word like that. One of the ones, but you want to know what kind of words, all sorts of stuff. Afro-Caribbean, African, slaves brought in from Africa, whatever. You had some rather obvious ones like that, big numbers, and then lots and lots of smaller ones. And one of my favorites, I have to say, was cinnamon. I thought that's a great way to express it. It's a beautiful color. I love it, and I always enjoy cinnamon. So you could use it as you saw fit, and it just was an interesting way to see how it was done. Well, 9.2% in 2010 said effectively one form of black or another. In 2023, when we finally got around to doing the 2020 census, which had been prevented due to the COVID, when we finally did that, and they went to a lot of trouble this time to get this done right, very thorough job from what I can see. We need more of it out, but a lot of it is out. They announced that the percentage that had chosen to describe themselves as black had gone from 9.2% to 31.6%. Actually, they said 0.7, but the final number, I think, was 31.63%. So how to go from 9.2 to 31.6? And the answer is because people chose to say that. There was no movement, there was no campaign, there was nobody out there saying we ought to call ourselves black now and so on. Panamanians are, generally speaking, a mix of white black and brown, you might say, indigenous. And what the few genetic studies I'm familiar with here have indicated that in the past, there's not as many pure blood or whatever people as you might think. No, so it is very definitely not a surprise that. What's the surprise is that people admit what they would once have been either ashamed of or concerned that they might lose an opportunity or not even get an interview for a job or something if they looked too dark. That isn't popular here anymore. That I was aware of already, and there's certainly a lot of, you look at couples here, and you can see, especially among young people, but across the board and older, the people today are very different. And they're much more proud of who they are as Panamanians in general. And so they've decided, apparently, they're not ashamed to say they're black. And I think 3 cheers. That's great. The point is they're saying who they are. You're not saying it. I'm not saying it. The government's not saying it. They're saying it. And they're not intimidated by it. And that is a big step. And they did it on their own without a major conflict over the whole thing, or a big campaign and big noisy and everything. That's so Panamanian, so Panamanian. When that came out months ago, I thought to myself, whoa, this is huge. This is really big. Something's happened. Between 2010 and 2023, there's been a shift. And the 15-year-olds of 2010 are now 28 years old. It's really, really amazing that there could be such a massive shift and not be a big noise made about it. But that's how it goes here. And that's why I love it. Because we don't waste our time fighting over what is, but learning to accept it and to work with it and to make it work for us. As long as Panama can maintain that attitude and that direction, it's got a great future ahead of it. And I believe they've got it. And I can see it in the people who've been elected to the National Assembly and the whole generation that's involved. I am very, very pleased. And I just wanted to share that with you, and you're probably the first person. I'm the first person probably ever mentioned it to you, because unless it's been happening in other websites I don't visit, I don't hear it talked about very much. I don't see why. I think it's good news. Thank you very much, and I will be back maybe tomorrow. Well, I expect it tomorrow. It better be tomorrow. Because I got to get this other one done and out. And so you'd be getting 2 a day apart. That's pretty unusual. So let's see if I can get this one out tonight. Thank you so much for your patience. See you soon.